The U.S. says a popular app poses a security threat to the country. Grindr, the California-based gay dating app, is now owned by a Chinese gaming company.
Since then, there have been a number of security issues, and the U.S. government is concerned about the possibility personal information could be hacked.
Klint Finley has been writing about this for Wired magazine and joins us now from Portland, Oregon. So, Klint, explain why the U.S. believes that Grindr, which is an app that's been around for a while now, how that app could be a security threat.
Well, there's kind of two parts to it. So, as you mentioned, it's owned by a Chinese company now, so it's now under Chinese law. So that's the first part of it. It's no longer under the jurisdiction of the U.S. And so it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see how the data that Grindr uses could be misused. So they collect a lot of particularly sensitive information. People's locations, their sexual preferences, their HIV status. So it could be a blackmailer's gold mine, essentially, if this information were to fall into the hands of an adversarial government.
So, Klint, have there been leaks before?
Well, security researchers have found some different ways that Grindr geolocation information could be leaked, and there have been some issues with how it was sharing HIV status information with third-party analytics companies. The latter, that practice has changed. Also, there was actually just recently a Chinese gay dating app that accidentally exposed quite a bit of personal information. So that's aside from the concerns over Chinese ownership. This is highly sensitive data, and securing any sort of massive amount of data, as we've seen numerous times in the last couple of years, is really difficult.
So I think this is kind of unusual, but you could probably put it in perspective. How unusual is it for the U.S. to intervene in a private business?
So it's actually become a lot more common under the Trump administration. So the U.S. agency in question here is, I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact name of the organization. It's called referred to as CFIUS, but they review foreign investments for potential national security risks, and they've blocked a few different acquisitions by Chinese companies in the U.S. In the past 2 years. They stopped a company affiliated with Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce company, from buying MoneyGram, which is a money transfer company. They stopped a investment firm that had reported ties to the Chinese government from acquiring a semiconductor company from the U.S. And most curiously, they stopped a Singapore semiconductor company from buying the U.S. chip maker Qualcomm over concerns that consolidation in the chip market would give an edge to Chinese companies, and that could pose a security risk if there weren't enough different U.S. or based chip makers to buy chips from. Do
we know how China is reacting to this stuff? Just curious. I mean, it almost seems like a bit of a shadow war, sort of.
Yeah, so China's also actually blocked a major investment. So Qualcomm, the U.S. chip maker I mentioned earlier, tried to buy a Dutch chip maker called NXP. And so even though that deal was actually involved two companies that aren't actually based in China, Chinese regulators blocked the deal regarding essentially the Chinese holdings of those two companies, and actually were able to get the entire deal killed. So there's a bit of a back and forth there. And I mean, each of these issues also have their own they have their own backstory. They have their own issues at hand. So it's not. I can't say this is all just involved. That it all comes down to the general trade war between the U.S. and China. But it's hard not to draw a connection there.
Totally.
So how do you think this all plays out, Klint?
I don't know for sure. It's hard to say. I think, though, once we get a actual trade agreement with the U.S. and China that clears up some of the ongoing concerns about intellectual property that will hopefully stabilize things a little bit.
You know, Clint, you've actually given me really something to think about. So Grindr is one thing, and I never even really considered some of the sensitive information. I just thought of it as a dating app. I didn't even consider that it would, take into account someone's HIV status and stuff like that. But then I wonder how many more apps, even apps do I own that, are owned by Chinese corporations now that may or may not have links to the government, because there is a lot of really personal information, your age, for me, your age, your height, your weight, but whether you have children and all that sort of stuff.
Right. So, and Chinese companies have been investing more in the U.S. And I can't say that it has anything to do with being nefarious. There haven't really been any established links so far between these companies and spying for the Chinese government. I want to be clear about that. That these are concerns, not proven instances, but. TikTok, which is an increasingly popular social media video app, is owned by a Chinese company called ByteDance. And the Chinese company Tencent just made a fairly large investment in Reddit, the U.S. news sharing site. So those are two areas that are there are two sites that I think a lot of people might not entirely realize have Chinese connections at this point.
Yeah.
Really fascinating report from you, Clint. Thank you for sharing it with us and our viewers. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.